TV News Check has a long-standing tradition of talking with a panel of station group leaders each year at our TV 2025 conference, and I'm very pleased to be continuing that tradition right now. With me today are three people who will be well known to you all: Jack Abernathy, CEO of Fox Television Stations; Pat LaPlatney, President and co-CEO of Gray Television; and Jordan Wertlieb, President of Hearst Television. Welcome to you all. And I should mention that until a few days ago, we were also meant to be joined by Tegna Chief Dave Luigi, but I think we all know now why he was unable to join us today. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Gentlemen, let's dive right in and start to talk about Spot TV. The 2020 numbers saw a big resurgence from the pandemic, but auto has taken a huge hit. So going around the horn with everyone, starting with Jordan, do you see auto rebounding?
I think we see auto rebounding next year. I think the supply chain issues, particularly around microchips, probably keep that market slow for the remainder of the year. But I think you'll see supplies improve. And as we get into, I'd say, mid to late first quarter, I'm optimistic you'll start to see a full recovery.
Okay, Pat?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's still a little bit unclear as to exactly when that rebound or when the chips are going to start to show up in force, but I would agree with Jordan.
Jack?
Not much to add. I just think maybe a little later, and if it does, it'll be coincide with our increase in the political cycle, and it's really going to be big. So all good. We're just going to have to wait.
Yeah, I know. I was at a Subaru dealership a couple of months ago getting a service done, and one can't get a car for love or money right now, it seems like, if you wanted to. But in the meantime, what emerging categories might and are taking its place? Legal, sports betting, anything else?
Yeah, I would say both of those certainly. I think the home improvement category is really pretty strong right now, and then health actually for our group is helping sort of fill that auto void.
Is that true for everyone?
Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Home improvement has always been an emerging category, particularly as commercial production costs have come down. Stations are able to get more clients on the air. Health, Pat's exactly right. We had a slowdown in health because obviously people were doing the important work of COVID care, but that is certainly recovering. I think legal is another robust category, and the gambling category depends on the jurisdiction and what the local state laws are, but we're seeing more of those come online. So all of that has helped recover any shortfalls.
The only thing to add would be that, betting is just such a great category because it is regional and local. It can't be nationalized like home improvement or other things where with big retailers. It's all local. It's very strong, and it will continue as it expands to hop around the country and help us where we have stations.
I want to ask you all also about retrans. How long can it last as a growing revenue stream, and when, if at all, is it time to push the panic button on retrans? Jordan?
Well, I think you've got to, first of all, define retrans, right? Retrans is, by definition, a subscription fee paid by a distributor to a broadcaster. And I think, first of all, we still have not seen rates that are commensurate with the audience share that the broadcaster brings to the ecosystem. But secondly, these platforms that are emerging are paying retrans fees if they're a virtual MVPD. And then I'm optimistic as the JCPA legislation comes online, you're going to see another revenue stream as tech platforms pay content publishers for their services. So I think there's a lot of headroom in retrans, but you've got to broaden your definition of what retrans is.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, I don't think retrans is going to, go away or we're going to push the panic button anytime soon. And absolutely agree with Jordan that, that the numbers that local broadcasters deliver are extraordinary, and what we get paid still doesn't sort of, square up with what we're delivering in terms of audience. So I think there's headroom there. Are some viewers starting to record? Yes. Are they moving to OTT? Yeah, and so we need to be there on OTT platforms as well. And again, we could sit and spend 45 minutes defining OTT. Really, more talking about AVOD there. But I think it's going to be a very, very material revenue stream for a long time to come.
Jack, do you agree? Oh, yeah. And by the way, I'm glad Luigi's not here, because if I keep going last, I'm really going to have nothing to say. I think these guys are right on. And we still aren't, commensurate value is not there compared to these little cable networks that still receive fees.
Well, Jack, is it time for broadcasters and cable to work more closely together now to stop subscriber erosion? I mean, they are partners in this, and cable is having a rough time. So, I mean, can broadcasters help promote the cable package where so much of this revenue is coming from?
See, I'm going to be nice to my other two guys and let them answer that. But when I thought the question, I thought it was interesting, because what happens sometimes is when you're constantly at odds with a partner or a supplier, sometimes you don't think like that, like, oh, what's in our best interest? And I think there could be some things we do. As an example, we sometimes have similar relationship with our union partners where we're at odds. We seem to be at odds over work rules and stuff. But over the past year, honestly, with a few exceptions, the unions have been really helpful in dealing with COVID. And the reason is because we're both concerned about safety and health and safety. And so we're, surprised, somebody hasn't surprised me that we're working together. So I thought about that when you asked this question, because we don't often sit down with our cable partners and say, hey, how do we do this? We often, have just been through a terrible negotiating thing where we're beating each other up in the press. And we need, so I think I don't have any real good ideas, but it's really something worth looking at.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? They come together?
Yeah, I think there are things that we could do potentially around the ad sales side of the business. There's a lot of targeting that the cable guys can do, and there's scale that local broadcasters could bring. With creative thinking, there may be a way to actually work together on that side. I would look the cable guys, while there is some sub erosion, they're doing okay on the broadband side of the business. But yeah, I think we generally have a pretty good relationship with our MVPD partners. We have tough discussions every once in a while, but in between, I think that's a good thought that we could try to work together to help each other's businesses.
Jordan, do you see that working together happening?
I do. We've talked to our partners on the distribution side for a number of years about ad sales solutions, distribution solutions. I think the cable industry has been very cooperative with the industry regarding next-gen television. So I do see those two ecosystems working more closely together down the road.
Jordan, I want to switch topics. Hearst just named Frank Biancuso as president of Hearst Media Production Group, which is a new business unit that's going to develop and produce original programming. What are your programming ambitions at Hearst?
Well, look, we've always been a major supporter of national syndication, and we'll continue to do that. But there's no secret that there's been a shortage of national syndicated programming. Obviously, there's more competitive sets buying programming, and we've always been our primary distribution or our primary programming creator with news. But we've got great storytellers at our local television stations. We also have a tremendous asset in Litton Entertainment, which not only produces EI programming, but does produce non-educational information programming, which people don't realize. We think that under Frank's leadership, we're going to be able to produce more programming to fill some of those voids. And some of that is going to be national in scope. Some of that will be more local in scope. Some of that will be dedicated for streaming. And then some of that will be dedicated for just buyers of programming. So we just think we have a lot of assets we can use to fill the void that we see coming down the road from national programming partners.
And I want to come back to that streaming programming with you in just a little bit. But Pat, I want to ask you something. Gray had obviously a busy year on the M&A side, but back in March, it had acquired, I think it's 127-acre studio space called Assembly. And then just last week, acquired Third Rail Studios, which is an adjacent movie and TV production facility. So what exactly are Gray's plans for these spaces? And what does this tell us about the company's own production ambitions?
Sure. First, it was a very big announcement locally, though relatively speaking, it's kind of a small investment for the company. You may know that the state of Georgia has a pretty strong tax credit program around the production industry. And so there's been a massive amount of production moving in this direction. We owned a part of some sound stages outside of Atlanta. We've been in that business for a while now, and it's good business. And so we saw an opportunity there to acquire some real estate and build studios. And I would tell you that it's as much a real estate play as it is. It's a play off this growth and there's this kind of explosion in content. But I would tell you that we're gonna retain some sound stages there. We have some production companies; they'll be doing some work there. But to be candid with you, we're not going to be expanding our own productions dramatically. Will we do a little more? Probably, but it doesn't. This is not a signal that we're going to do a lot more.
Okay. I want to remind our audience, by the way, if you have questions, to submit those. Don't wait till the last minute to do so. I'm sure you've got lots to ask as well as I do. Jack, in one sense, you have the toughest job of anybody here. You have the most time to fill because you get little help from the network. So what are your upcoming plans for filling these hours? Is it more news, more syndication? I mean, I know you've got Jay Leno's new game show, for instance. I talked to him about it a couple of weeks ago on our podcast, but what else have you got?
Just going back to your point before, it's great to see Jordan and Pat and others producing programming. When I first started in this job, you're right, we got 2 hours a day on Fox and generally big duopolies. And so I had to buy and refresh a whole lot of programming and still do. I did it with news, but I couldn't rely on the studios because, as Jordan hinted, they're doing less and less. So we have always been involved. Mostly it's kind of the singles and doubles. The court shows, Dish Nation. We did a game show, 25 words or less. Those are the shows that no one's bringing us. So we've had to do it ourselves. The Jay Leno one was our first. When I say our, I mean within the station group. We had 20th Television for a while, but that moved over to Disney a few years ago. So the Leno show is our first real big swing, and we're real happy. The ratings aren't great, but we love the show, and we expect those ratings will improve. So we've always been doing that, but it's good to see other groups bring some creativity. Now, we all do news, and we've all expanded news here and there, but it's good to see people, jumping into talk, game, and other formats, because I just think it makes broadcasting stronger if everybody's throwing things against the wall.
I'm curious about how our two affiliate group heads here are thinking about the new football contracts that kick in with the 2023-24 season. I mean, it's great that you'll continue to have the NFL on your schedule, but the cost of the rights is doubling. Aren't your reverse comp payments going to go way up too? And are you going to be able to pass those costs on to the MVPDs through retrans increases? Jordan, you want to take that?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily tie those two together. Those are two separate discussions. Programming is a marketplace demand. The NFL is the largest reach vehicle in the marketplace. I think it speaks volumes that the NFL has committed out into the 2030s to broadcast television. Their confidence in the distribution platform, because we're 100% accessible in the marketplace, speaks volumes. Our distribution partners, that's a marketplace negotiation based on share of audience and the stickiness of your brand to their bundle. I don't think there's a linear relationship between an increased rights fee and an increased retrans fee. Obviously, there's market pressures, but again, I think you separate those two. You buy a program for what its value is, and the NFL clearly has value, and then you negotiate your fee based on the value of your station and your product.
Pat, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, Jordan's 100% correct. I don't think that, I don't think that it's necessarily accurate to assume that reverse comp payments have to go way up. And then passing those on to the MVPDs. Look, we said earlier that it's a marketplace based on the value of your station. So I just not a ton to add to what Jordan said. I would suggest that the deals that the NFL did with the big four are a little different than they have been in years past regarding sort of other types of programming on other platforms. And so I think that factors into the equation as well.
I want to just, we have an audience question that comes back to retrans and is for Jordan. So I want to interject with that one here right now. Jordan, you mentioned expanding the meaning of retrans. The question from the audience here is, do you think that an FCC proceeding on treating streaming services like MVPDs is realistic, especially given the FCC's current 2-2 situation?
Well, the FCC's current situation will be resolved by the administration at some point. I think if we want to be intellectually honest, anyone that's distributing our signal is an MVPD. And I think the fact that the commission didn't classify virtuals as MVPDs when they could have done, which I think is back in 2015, was a miss. The environment was new, but we like to say over and over again, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, I mean, these guys are acting like MVPDs in every way, and I think should fall under a regime of some sorts. And the easiest thing would be to define them as MVPDs.
Let me bring it back to football for a second with the new contracts. What about concerns of the loss of NFL exclusivity? You don't have to watch an NBC affiliate to watch Sunday Night Football anymore. You just have to subscribe to Peacock. So are there concerns about that?
Who are you directing your question towards?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That could be either Pat or Jordan first.
Yeah. So are we concerned about sort of less exclusivity? Sure. It's not ideal. Starting years ago, Raycom Sports, which is part of our company, used to distribute ACC basketball and other things, but we'll talk about ACC basketball for a minute. Years ago, we started simulcasting some big games on ESPN. So they ran in syndication, and for instance, the Duke Carolina game would air on ESPN. And every time that occurred, the overwhelming majority of viewership, went to the local station. So I think that's what's going to happen here. Again, is it ideal? No, but it's something that we're all going to need to live with.
Jordan, do you share that view that more eyeballs will go to the local station?
Oh, it's proven. It's overwhelmingly proven. Pat's right. We see it with ESPN simulcast, NFL Network simulcast. I think some of the streaming platforms are already looking for broadcast partners for the local outlets. Look, with the prices the way they are, the leagues have to look at every platform for distribution, but they know who the primary distribution partner is, which is broadcast. Our network partners are also trying to make sure they're in front of those audiences that are streaming first, and that's why a Peacock and an All Access is what it is. And I think the networks have been very realistic in working with their affiliates in partnership to make sure that that audience has a benefit to its affiliates as well, even though it does diminish our exclusivity in the aggregate. Again, we have interest in all those platforms to make sure we're in front of all the audience.
Jack, are we going to see any of the Fox Sunday games migrate to Tubi or some other streaming service?
No, we have no plans to do that. Tubi's different than Disney Plus or Peacock. It is not a subscription service, and it is not one where we're going to want to sneak, high value content into it in order to drive subscriptions. It's a TVT platform, It's a long tail platform. So while we have sports, we've announced we're putting sports on Tubi. I wouldn't expect to see any premier telecasts on there.
Now, right now, you can watch your local CBS affiliate on Paramount Plus, albeit on the premium tier. Jordan and then Pat, would you like to see Disney's Hulu or Disney Plus or NBC's Peacock include the local affiliates?
Well, Hulu does. Hulu Live has the local affiliates. So the answer is yes. We'd like our signal to be distributed on every platform and be paid for that signal. So we welcome the opportunity to be distributed everywhere.
Yeah,
Pat,
nothing to add on that one. That's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
There is a growing belief that the big multimedia companies that own the networks are directing their best talent and most of their programming dollars into their streaming ventures, and they're shortchanging broadcasting. Jordan, I know when we talked in advance of this, you don't necessarily share that belief. Why is that?
Well, again, audience bears out. If you look at the top 10 programs on broadcast television, all of them average 10 million viewers. And I think it's important to note they average 10 million viewers at every moment of the broadcast. That's not starts or reach. That's an average audience at any given time. Some of the programming that's been directed to streaming services, I think, have passionate followings. But when they have been brought over by CBS or others to broadcast, they don't rank in the top 100. And as you know, most of the streaming platforms, there's no audience measurement. They don't release their numbers. And while they have quality programming for sure, I'm not sure they're broadcasting. They're in the same genre in broadcasting. And this issue of the quality, this has been going on for 25 years. I mean, The Sopranos was in 1999 considered the best show on television, and it was on HBO. So streaming has replaced that ecosystem, if you will. And I think this idea of one is robbing from the other is overblown.
Jack, what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that the networks are putting some of their best talent and their dollars into streaming, and that broadcasters are getting the shift, or do you disagree with that premise as well?
You know, I think Jordan's right generally. But I've always been concerned. I was part of a much bigger company a few years ago. I was always concerned that the best talent got onto broadcasting, and for the most part it did. But now, when we're a much smaller company without a SVOD service, I'm actually much more comfortable than that the talent is going to broadcasting. We don't have a studio. We don't have a SVOD service. So, but I think Jordan's right, you know, in generally. But I think we're structured pretty nicely as just a pure broadcaster.
Mm-hmm. And Pat, does the premise? Do you agree with the premise, or find that? Where do you weigh in on this?
Yeah, so I agree with Jordan. I do think this all the best stuff's going to go to Peacock, or it's going to go to Paramount Plus is nonsense. There's still a ton of really good programming on the networks. In fact, I think you can make an argument that the programming today on the networks is as good as it's ever been. I think we can't sort of put our head in the sand and ignore the fact that large media companies are sort of putting their assets into DTC businesses. We need to be partners in those businesses. We also need to think about our core business, which is local news and information, and make sure that those operations are really healthy. And that's still a really good business.
This next question is for you, Pat, first, and then Jack, I want to put it to you. All the publicly traded station groups are now off of their 52-week highs. So what doesn't Wall Street get about the TV broadcasting business still?
Yeah, so I think I'll give you a thought that I think has been out there for a long time. I think that in some ways they undervalue the strength of local, and local news in particular. It's a huge draw, and not just in linear, but on the newer platforms as well.
Mm-hmm. Jack, do you think they didn't quite get the message after the pandemic and the importance of local news to communities? That doesn't connect?
look, I'm not sure. I mean, they clearly the numbers spiked. They had a huge spike, and then they came down a little bit, but they're still above where they were. So I think that there's this sort of long-term view that, hey, people are not sitting down in front of the TV at 6 o'clock, and that audience is, a fraction of what it was. And the truth of the matter is, at least in our markets, that's not the case.
Jack, is the other publicly traded company here? What do you think?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm not a pure play broadcaster. And so their misunderstanding of the value of Tubi is probably more a factor in my stock than anything. And by the way, it just feels lately like any rationality in the stock market within a narrow period of time is just not there anymore. But, I think that they don't get the fact that this past year, our local news has informed, has calmed down, has really, served the public in a very difficult and scary time. And it's been local broadcasters. I just saw a report the other day about our trust levels are as high as they've ever been. I said the other day, whenever the first day of the pandemic was, somewhere in March of 2020, for our operations people in news, back to work was the very next day. We had to cover protests, fires, all sorts of stuff over the last year. So I think Pat's right about the strength and the durability of local news, and it was never more clear over the past year and a half. And the other issue, and I go back to your question about sales, political advertising, even we know goes up and down. It was so much higher in the last election. And there's no reason to believe that's not going to be true again. I mean, we have a station in Atlanta, and for our fiscal year, the political sales in Atlanta were more than double the political sales in Atlanta for the last 7 years combined. Think about that. And so I just think we have challenges, but this business has really demonstrated its strength over the last year, and its resilience. And I don't spend a lot of time trying to worry about where Wall Street is from a rational standpoint.
Well, of course, in Atlanta, you had the benefit of that Senate election after the.
Oh yeah, it was extraordinary. Atlanta was never really a battleground state, and it became one. But we've seen that a real tick up on all levels of political over the last year.
Mm-hmm. I want to look at the streaming efforts that are underway inside of each of your groups. Jack, Fox has expanded what was called News Now. It's been rechristened Live Now, and you've got the niche channel Fox Soul. I know Live Now has more desks across the nation from which that's being reported, but can you tell us a little bit about what's next in your streaming trajectory?
Well, it's not. I'm not managing it directly, but I'm very involved in Fox Weather, which is going to launch in October. And my view of the streaming is informed by probably the last two, what I'll call new platforms, right? And this shows my how long I've been doing this. When cable came in, all the innovation was in niche products. It was in C-SPAN, it was in the Weather Channel, it was in CNN. The networks didn't really initially contribute because it was a niche. It was niche services to serve the public. Similarly, when the web, however that's described, came in, TV stations put their newscast online. That really didn't resonate. It was the niche. It was TMZ. It was very nichey news platforms that sort of led the way. And I think in streaming, I see a lot of people just putting their newscasts or just replicating their newscasts. And I think it's the niche services that are going to do well. And that's why we started with Soul, as you mentioned, is a niche. News Now is I wouldn't say it's a lot different from what other people doing, but it's just live cameras. and then you'll see weather in October. So that's been our approach. We're watching everything that's going on, but I think niche and innovation that really finds something that the public really wants to jump on, and that's going to be their success. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Can you break a little news here and tell us what the next niche after weather might be?
I'm working on it, but I won't tell Jordan and Pat first. I'll go about it in a different way.
Okay. Pat, Gray has OTT desks and apps now for all of its stations. There's a partnership with View It. You're also doing a lot of direct selling of OTT, I know, at your stations as opposed to just programmatic. So you've been busy on that front. What's next for Gray?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a ton of eyeballs moving in the direction of OTT. We got our stations leaning in. They're both, on the production and then the sales side with our partnership with Premium. It's working out great. Thank you, Dave. We also have our production companies active in that area. Origin Sports, which is kind of a library play from Raycom Sports. And then RTM, which is one of our production companies that produces, I guess you call it like auto enthusiast or gearhead programming, is really, I would say, gathering a pretty significant audience on the AVOD and the AVOD platform. So, that content also lives on View It, and the audience is going there as well. So look, I think we've got a lot of ideas, not ready to disclose them, kind of like Jack. But there is, I think the AVOD platforms create a lot of opportunities can sort of shift the way we think about distribution going forward.
Mm-hmm. So playing your cards a little close to the vest, both of you, but and nobody was maybe playing them as close as Hearst was. But Jordan, this week, Hearst announced the launch of Very Local, which is a network of fast streaming channels across the group's footprint that'll launch under an O&O app, and then Tubi and View It and some other distribution channels, as I understand it, to come along online soon. Relative to the other station groups, this was a late start in the streaming space for the station. So why the wait?
Well, I always hate to start a question with disagreeing with the premise. We were one of the founding partners of News On. So we've been in the space. And through our ownership of Litton, we launched Explore a while ago, which has been internationally distributed. So again, between News On and Explore, we understood where the streaming space was going. And to Jack's point, I think niche is important. I think the best value proposition that we have is local. So rather than just taking a station app and putting your news on it, like Jack said, I don't think that's the strategy. I think we wanted to capture something more niche and more local. And with the umbrella of Very Local, I am visiting our station here in Milwaukee today. And well, we were talking earlier about Very Milwaukee, and that will have interesting programming. Not only from our Very Local production team, the station will contribute to that. Of course, you've got the home of the world champion Bucks, and there's opportunity there. We also have programming now from our magazine partners, Delish and Runner's World and Esquire and other magazines. So we wanted to build out something that when the consumer samples it, and I will tell you in this space, you don't get sampled more than once. When the consumer samples it, they find a robust library of programming that makes them come back. And so we were, I think, a little thoughtful as to what the next iteration was going to be beyond News On and Explore. And now we've launched Very Local. The other part to that is, and Pat mentioned this, we sell these OTT apps ourselves. We don't have a Premium partnership. And Hearst AnyScreen, which is a product that we have, and we did some announcements about today. We think when we can use the inventory from Very Local, it also becomes discernibly different, where we're not having to go into the audience market and buy audience. We're able to generate owned and operated audience for our sellers to sell under the Hearst AnyScreen umbrella. So there was a strategy here that involved both content and sales.
Are you able to elaborate a little bit on some of the original digital content that you're going to be offering them? How much can we expect? Who's going to, you mentioned just now your content partners with some of the magazine titles. Can you paint a little bit more specific a picture yet?
Well, there's programming from the magazine content. There's programming from Linton Entertainment, which is one of our program suppliers. Frank Biancuso's group that you referenced earlier is a program provider. But most of it is coming from a dedicated, very local production team that is already creating programming. And you're going to see introductions of new titles. And I'm going to steal from Jack and Pat and not share that today. But those new titles will start rolling out in the next few weeks.
So that's a group-wide team that's working with the individual stations?
It's a group-wide team that's actually working independently right now, and then eventually we'll start working with the stations on some specific projects for those stations. But right now they're working in regions, creating unique programming.
Okay, so at individual stations, there will be some unique programming for each market produced inside of those stations, presumably then too.
There will be, but there'll also be programming that's unique to that market that's produced by a team that's separate from the stations.
Okay. Now, for all of you, where do you see streaming's revenue potential at this point? I mean, can it be significant enough to break out of the sort of digital's single-digit percentage revenue dungeon that it's been in at many groups for so long? You know, and related to that, how do TV groups even define what the real market is here for them? And Jordan, if you could start with that, please.
Well, so let me just start by, I think there's incredible content on streaming, and it's a fantastic platform. What's interesting to the advertisers is targetability and the measurability. So I also think you've got to look at next generation TV eventually in the ecosystem, because as we have that capability, our broadcast signal, once it moves into that environment, becomes another definition of streaming in some regard, at least for the advertisers. I think that right now, 2/3 of all viewing on a daily basis is still live linear. And most of the streaming is SVOD, Jack's point, not AVOD. So you've got a tremendous amount of upside as the audience grows. But I think you got to look at the broadcaster as just moving into a digital environment, whether it's next gen TV or streaming. And we're going to have just exponential advantages, because right now, without targetability, broadcasting is underpriced.
Mm-hmm. Jack, where do you weigh on the?
I was just going to disagree with your premise when you said the dungeon. What was it? That sounded like a Harry Jessel thing. The dungeon. What was it again?
No, that's not Harry. That's me.
Okay.
But well, I mean, it has been low. I mean, some groups are. I just talked to Graham Media. I was talking to Emily Barr yesterday, and they're about 15% roughly of overall revenues coming from digital. But a lot of groups are still in the single digits there.
Yeah. Look, what broadcasters can't do is to say, oh, you know, our margins have never been higher, and they have never been higher, and it's to say, oh, we can't jump into anything without this, you know, a big huge margin. No, we have to develop businesses. We have to go after the consumers and give them what they want, and we have to. It's a very different. Digital's different. Like I think what Jordan said, you got to get it right the first time. And so that's what we're doing. And the fact that it might be growing its low single digits is not an indication necessarily of where these businesses can be long-term and additive.
Pat, what do you think about the revenue potential of streaming?
Yeah, so I think, look, digital video is really popular right now. And Jordan mentioned that, you know, SVOD is bigger than AVOD, which means that there's sort of somewhat limited supply. So the CPMs in that world are really, really strong. And you know, that it's not just Premion, it's Jordan's product. And you know, all the targeted stuff is in great demand right now. And Jordan made another great point. Once 3.0 rolls around, you know, when all of your impressions are highly targetable, your CPMs they're not gonna double, they're gonna triple, or they're gonna go way up beyond that. So look, I you know, we've been out of the single digit revenue dungeon for a while, or percentage dungeon for a while, I would say. We don't break out those numbers, but we are, you know, digital has been a focus of our company for some time now. And the sort of the streaming or the digital video potential is accelerating that growth. And so I think I honestly think it's the future of the business.
I want to move on to M&A. It seemed for a while that all this year's M&A activity might be front-loaded in January, though Tegna may be proving us wrong this week. Just quickly going around the horn again, starting with Jordan, what are each of your thoughts on what we might expect on the M&A front as the rest of the year plays out?
I have no comment on what to expect. I think that broadcasting is a great business. It's proven out over and over again by the multiples. We're a buyer for the right assets, and I'll defer to Pat, who seems to be on the forefront of that.
What do you think?
We're plenty busy right now with what we've announced, and so I don't have a crystal ball in terms of what's going to happen the rest of the year. So I'll throw it to Jack.
I would like to phone a friend. Can I get Luigi on the phone? Hold on one second.
Let me text you his number.
Yeah. No, we don't have any immediate plan. I mean, we've purchased and swapped stations for advantages at the margin. I just think generally it's good for the industry. It really is. And the idea that it's somehow bad that groups get bigger is ridiculous. And I heard from one left, it wasn't a commissioner or someone, oh, the companies get big and then they don't serve the public. You know what? If you look at Nexstar, it may not be they're saying it's succeeding, but that thing they're doing in Chicago is an attempt to serve the public. And they say it's not succeeding yet, but big companies can do those things, and we can go out and do a lot of the stuff we just talked about because we have the resources. It doesn't mean there's going to be, fewer voices. There are going to be more voices and stronger voices. So I'm an advocate for M&A in the short term. We're happy with our size.
Okay. I want to, we're running against our time here. I want to make sure to ask you all this question about diversity, equity, and inclusion, as we are four white men here having this conversation today. For each of you, starting with Jack, what concrete steps have your groups taken in the past year, not only to recruit, but to open up management pathways for a diversity of employees?
Well, first of all, we didn't just decide to wake up in the past year and address this. It's always been an issue of ours. I think the main thing that we've done is we have a relationship with the Emma Bowen Foundation, which allows us to recruit. We pay for internships and get the best people out there. And to just demonstrate our commitment to what we've all been talking about for the last 20 minutes, we've doubled. We now get two at each station, and the newer person is in digital. So every one of our stations now has added a digital Emma Bowen candidate, and they're terrific folks. And because we think that's where the future is.
Pat, what about at Gray, DEI?
Yeah, so we make it a point to have diverse candidates for every management position. We do everything we can to make our management and station profile reflective of their markets. All of our leadership attended a 5-week session to focus on DEI with the curriculum, particular curriculum to address, potential bias in selection and promotion. So it's hiring diverse managers, really at every level of the organization. Diversity is a good thing and makes you stronger. So I'll toss it to Jordan.
Yeah, look, I think the industry has been focused on this, to Jack's point, the last couple of years. Obviously, this has been heightened with the events of last year, but as Pat can tell you, the NAB had put through its entire board through diversity inclusion training in late 19, early 2020 to advance this discussion. So this is not just a recent issue. It's an issue that the industry's been taking on. Similar to Jack, we have expanded our relationship with Emma Bowen with a intern at every one of our stations and our bureaus. We had 34 young people in the program this year, and we're going to continue that. We added a director of D&I programming this year who is simply focused on not only recruitment, but retention and advancement of people in color within the company. We added a dedicated recruiter for this point. The other thing we did, which I think is important, is we implemented a change agent program within our stations to educate our folks about the importance of diversity and inclusion. And numbers speak for itself. I think our stations are getting better. We've promoted people of color into the general manager ranks, where the industry is woefully behind the communities they represent in that space. But we need more managers, more department heads, and I think the efforts are earnest. And I think Jack's point is right. If you put the money behind the programs like Emma Bowen and T. Howard Foundation and others, you're going to see benefits. If you're just going to speak to the importance of it, which I think the industry did for many years, you're not going to see meaningful change. But I think now we're all on the right track, and the NAB and Emma Bowen are leading that effort on a number of fronts.
And of course, anybody will tell you that CEO buy-in on this issue is essential. It does sound like you're very invested in the issue based on what you're saying. One last question to go around the horn because we've come up against our time. Can broadcasting continue to sustain 4 major networks? Will we have 4 networks 3 or even 5 years from now? Pat, can you take that first, please?
Sure. The answer is yes. I think it can. I think the partnership's going to evolve. The push towards direct-to-consumer is a pretty significant shift in the business that we've known as affiliates. And look, I mean, there could be other people that decide to get into that business. Maybe there's a different player 5 years or 10 years down the road. Who knows? But I think the answer is yes.
Jordan?
Oh, I a resounding yes. People know I believe there has never been a better franchise distribution system ever invented than the network affiliate relationship, where we aggregate local audiences, hand it to our network partners for network programming. They hand it back to us. I think the networks recognize that. I agree with Pat. I wouldn't be surprised if there were emerging players that came into the market like Fox did in 1986 and said, how do we get in the game? And then the affiliates actually have more options for network distribution.
Jack, you'll get the last word.
Not much to add. I think you're right. I think the biggest indication of this is the NFL sticking primarily with broadcast partners going forward. I think there will be financial challenges to each network depending on where they are competitively. But no, I think we're good. 5 years, 15, whole different question.
Okay, well, that is all the time that we have today. I would like to thank Jack Abernathy, Pat LaPlatney, and Jordan Wertlieb for being part of this discussion today, along with all of our TV 2025 panelists over the past 2 days. And thanks to all of you for being here today. Goodbye for now.